I want to introduce Professor William Keel, who's our next speaker. He has been at the University of Kansas in the Department of Germanic Languages and Literatures since 1978, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay. He was the chair of the department from 1990 to 2011. His teaching and research interests are in German dialectology, Germanic philology, the structure of modern German, and German-American studies, so quite a wide range of interests there. He's also an expert on the German settlement dialects, which are called Sprachinseln in German. He directs the linguistic atlas of Kansas German dialects. And if you get a chance, go out and look at the website. It's linked from the KU German Department website. They have a lot of great recordings out there that you can hear from different speakers that Professor Keel and some of his graduate students have gone out and done interviews with those folks. Professor Keel has also led KU's Advanced Summer Language Institute in Holzkirchen, Germany, which is in southern Bavaria for several years, and still doing that, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay. Professor Keel has also long been known for his hospitality with students at KU. And when I was a student there, I know that I went to a couple of good parties at his house, so going way back. I took a class actually as a KU senior with Dr. Keel on the history of the German language, and I have to say that was probably the best class that I had as an undergraduate or as a graduate student. So
I hope you'll report that to the dean.
And he's received many awards here and abroad, and it's an honor for me to introduce him as our next speaker.
Could I just see the hands again? How many of you do speak some form of German? Okay. Well, to try to carry on from Ed, I should say something like, wo geht die dat von Dorge? And how many of you could respond to that? Aha. Well, how about if I said, wie bist? What would you say? He said, okay, at least he got that much. The first one was Low German, which we'll get to in a little bit. And the second one was Pennsylvania Dutch, all of which are still spoken in Kansas, both of which I should say. And as you can see from my title, I'm not going to be talking about German as we know it from Martin Luther and the Bible translation and the standard language that we teach. Where's Julia? Oh, you're all the way at the back of the room, Julia. Well, anyway, there are folks who teach what I'll call literary German, but what I'm interested in is this stuff. Let's all try this. Deutsch, 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 all of which refer to the languages that German immigrants have brought to Kansas, and all of which, just as Ed was talking about the Osage language, are still spoken today. In some cases, we're witnessing the last stages of those languages. In other cases, we cannot predict when those languages will pass from the face of Kansas. So let's get started, shall we, Brian? Okay. I thought I would just plunge in with a text. Yeah, it's a lot of verbiage on a slide. But I'll read this to you, and I'll translate it as we go on. Draußen die Kundre hun zwei Leid gewohnt. Out in the country, two people lived, Mann und Frau, man and wife. Und der Mann war so unbänderlich tight mit sein Geld. And the man was really tight with his money. Und jedes Mal, wenn die Frau ein bisschen Geld holen wollte, dann sagte na, das Geld will ich aufheben. Wenn ich sterbe, das will ich alles in Heiligen Peter persönlich geben, persönlich. And each time when his wife wanted a little bit of money, he would say, nope, I'm going to save that money, and when I die, I'm going to give it all to St. Peter personally. Und es seien all ziemlich viel Jahren vorbeigegangen und das kleine Weib, die will wieder ein bisschen Tischtuchen oder Vorhänge für ihr Kich. Na, sagte, na, das Kaschegeld will mir aufheben, weil wenn ich sterbe, das will ich in Heiligen Peter persönlich geben. And each time when the little wife wanted some money to get a new tablecloth or curtains for the kitchen, he would say, nope, that cash I'm going to keep, and when I die, I'm going to give it to St. Peter personally. Na, der hat es gesagt und sie waren so ungestanden ziemlich viele Jahre und ist der Mann gestorben. And he kept saying that over and over again, and they were married for quite a number of years, and finally he died. So 6, 7 Monate noch, dass tot war, na, die denkt, die geht da noch in oberster Boden, wo immer gearbeitet hat, und sieht da, was der immer da oben gedau hat. And 6, 7 months after he died, she decided she's going to go up to the attic where he'd been working all this time and see what he'd been doing up there. Und hat die Schlüssel nicht und endlich hat sie die Tür gebrochen und ist nein. And she couldn't find the key, but she finally broke in the door and got in. Und große Säcke haben da gehungen aus Betttücher, waren richtig große, hat die gedenkt. And when she got in, there were large sacks made out of bed sheets hanging from the rafters, really big ones, she thought. Und die ist hingegangen und grabt dann ein Betttuch und reißt auf. And she goes over and tears open one of these bed sacks. Und heiliges Lebenstags, da kommt das ganze Kasche Geld raus und fällt und hat die nie tief in Geld gestanden. And all that money came pouring out, and all of a sudden she was standing knee deep in money. Und hat die Nuft geguckt an Himmel und hat satt sinna. And then she looked up to heaven and said, Dank den allmächtigen Gott, der ist ja der andere Weg gegangen. Thanks be to Almighty God, he went the other way. Now, I don't know how many of you could understand my poor rendering of that dialect. It's a Volga German dialect from Ellis County, from Shenya, out where Jim. You know Larry? Good. I hope he's doing well. I like to also begin this kind of a presentation by just simply asking the audience, where are we? These are place names that you might find looking on some map. Let's start over here. Olmütz, where's that? Who knows? Nobody? I know, Jim, you know. Okay, I'm not going to tell you. Barton County. How about Olpe? Lyon County, good. South of it. What's it noted for? The chicken house. Chicken restaurant, and German Catholics, I might add. Okay. How about, let's pick Basel. Where would that be? What? Switzerland? It could be Switzerland. It also might be Dickinson County. All right. But Switzerland is good. How about Bremen? Nobody knows these places? Do you guys teach geography of Kansas at Johnson County? Okay. Marshall County, Kansas. Where is it in Germany, though? Brian? North, up on the North Sea coast. Actually, a little bit inland from the sea coast, but way up north. How about Stuttgart? What county in Kansas, folks? Phillips. That's getting a little bit out west for most people here, I guess. And where is it in Germany? Can you give me more than just Western? Baden-Württemberg. And where's that in Germany? Now we're down here, southwest. So we had Bremen up north, Stuttgart down south. These are too easy. Marienthal, Pfeiffer, Schönchen, where are they? Marienthal is real far out on the Colorado line, or a county, Wichita County near Colorado. And the other two are in Ellis County. Are they in Germany? Probably. The answer is no. Where are they, Jim Leiker? They're in Russia, or at least they were in Russia. And getting back to Olmütz, does anybody know where that is in Europe, besides Barton County, Kansas? Moravia, does that ring a bell? Where's Moravia? I'm going to spend my whole time on this one slide, I guess. I heard the Czech Republic. Thank goodness somebody said that. Let's see. Dresden's a little bit too easy. Hanover. Do you know what county Hanover is in Kansas? Washington County. Okay. How about Elbing? Where's that? Butler County, down near Wichita. And where is it in Europe? Today it would be in Poland. in what used to be called West Prussia, okay? Well, I could go on and on. Oh, Windhorst, that's a good one. Hector, do you know where Windhorst is?
I will say Finney County, but I don't have it.
Go east from Finney County, a couple counties. Ford. Yeah, it's just east of Dodge City, okay. I won't go through all these, but what you can see is there are a lot of German these are not the only ones, of course. There are a lot of German place names, and they're indicative of where all these folks came after we kicked Ed's people out. All right. Just a real quick, Windhorst, by the way, was a German Catholic political leader in the 1870s, and Windhorst, Kansas, which is now a ghost town, was founded by German Catholics from Cincinnati who came out to Ford County in the 1870s, just for that little footnote there. But the rest of them you can figure out if you look hard enough. This is an interesting map from the 2000 census. I'm sorry they picked, what color is that? What would you call that? Mustard? Really? It must be mustard with horseradish. Anyway, it's a kind of a brownish yellow, tan. But who can tell me what those colored counties represent? Those are the counties whose largest ancestry is German. Okay. And as you can see, with the exception of green down here, which is Mexican, Kansas is pretty German. Here's a county in southeastern Kansas where they're American. They didn't really know. This is a little bit different map. This is the map of German ancestry showing its intensity. The darker the red or the deeper the red, the larger the German ancestry in a particular county. So this has nothing to do with the recent national election, although I believe Romney did take Nebraska, so it's all red. But Kansas is pretty red. We've got some really decent German ancestry in Kansas. It's about 30% roughly, okay? And that shows you in Kansas, here's a bunch of counties up on the Nebraska line, Marshall, Washington, Nemaha County, where we saw Bremen and Hanover. That's pretty heavily German ancestry. Here's our kind of Volga, what do you want to call it, Jim? He's going to call it Volga German. I was going to come up with something funny, but anyway, that's Bierock country, or post-rock, I guess we could say. Who knows what's the name of that county? Or what the name of that county is? Tried Cheyenne County. St. Francis is the county seat. And that's where we have a large number of Germans from the Black Sea who remain unexplored at this date, okay? Now, there's also some older Mennonite settlements down in here, and we need to talk about a couple of these counties later on. And as we think about German, we need to also keep in mind, where do these people come from? We have a modern country of Germany that has been in existence for how many years, Brian?
Since 1871.
How about 1990? 1871 was the German Empire under good old Kaiser Bill and Bismarck, but United Germany exists since 1990. And prior to that, there were all kinds of different configurations of Germany. But we also don't want to neglect Austria. Even if you don't like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Austria is still pretty German. And about 2/3 of Switzerland is German in its nature, in its language and culture. Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, but it goes beyond Central Europe. Prior to World War I, German was much more widespread in Eastern Europe. Here's West Prussia that I was talking about, and East Prussia. Elbing is about right in here. Here you can see There's Olmütz in Moravia. Here you can see the Swiss, the Austrians. That's a weird map of Liechtenstein, actually, but anyway. Luxembourg, a couple of pockets here in Belgium. But Germans were coming to the New World from all of this territory, plus there were some Germans who made mistakes in their life. They went east instead of west because they thought they could find a new home in the Russian Empire. And we've got folks that settled on the Volga in the 1760s, Jim's Volga Germans. We have Mennonites who went down to the Black Sea area in the 1790s and started colonies down there. We have people in Volhynia that colonized that area. Transylvania, the home of Dracula. Germans colonized parts of what's now Romania, the Ukraine, Poland, throughout the later Middle Ages and into the 18th and 19th century. So we had Germans all over the place. At the time, Kansas was opened for, what are we going to call this, Ed? White European settlement? Is that good enough? All right. Or how about aggressor settlement? No. And when was Kansas opened for this settlement? What year? You got a BA, Brian. 1854. All right. Who signed that legislation? Your favorite president, probably? Franklin Pierce. We should have a monument to him right here on the campus. Okay. At that time, there were already thousands of Germans living in what we call the United States. This is an 1870 census map showing German areas of settlement, the whole Missouri River Valley, a lot around St. Louis, over here near Cincinnati, Cleveland, Milwaukee, et cetera, Iowa. And by the 1870s, you can see there's already a group here in the Kansas City area and out in northeastern Kansas that show up on this census map. A lot of these folks are heading west. All right, so you got people from the eastern United States, from Central Europe, from Eastern Europe, all converging on Kansas. Why? Well, they were recruited. What was going on in Kansas in the late 1850s? How do we designate that period of our history? The slavery issue. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was an important piece of legislation. It opened Kansas territory for settlement, but it also opened up the question of, will Kansas be a slave state or a free state or a non-slave state? And for better or for worse, the abolitionists believed that Germans would vote for the free state constitutions. We had 4 attempts at a constitution, by the way. So they actively recruited Germans to come out here and settle in Kansas in the late 1850s. I'm sure you all have the Settler's Guide in German on your library shelves at home, published in 1857. Germans created a lot of settlements in the Territorial period, including Humboldt in Allen County, named after whom? Vince? Perfect. That's why he was my best student. Okay. Alexander von Humboldt. Who was Alexander von Humboldt? I'll repeat whatever you say.
He was the brother of Wilhelm.
He was Wilhelm's brother. Okay. He took a expedition of discovery to South America, Mexico, Cuba around 1800. And he then visited our president in Washington, D.C., Thomas Jefferson, and consulted on the Lewis and Clark expedition. He then went back to Europe, wrote many, many books, including a book about Cuba. What was in chapter 7 of Humboldt's book about Cuba? It was a diatribe against slavery in Cuba. What happened in 1856? Humboldt's book was translated from the original French, sorry about that, into English by a publisher in South Carolina. what chapter of Humboldt's book was omitted? The chapter against slavery. Humboldt, who was almost 90 years old in Berlin, was hopping mad, and he wrote letters to American newspapers complaining about that. And a group of German Methodists from Connecticut came to Kansas and settled in southern Kansas at that time and named their town after the poster child, the German poster child for the anti-slavery movement, Alexander. By the way, they were burned by the who talked about the Confederates? They burned Humboldt in the Civil War in 1861, just like Lawrence got burned 2 years later. They named their streets originally after great Germans. I'm sure you read most of these authors' Vince, Goethe, Schiller, etc. Some were even people who were executed during the recent German revolutions of 1848, like Robert Blum and Adolf von Trützler, who, since nobody could pronounce these names, they changed them to trees later on, like oak and cedar. But anyway, at the beginning, they were right on target. There was even, how many of you know this Kansas abolition song from 1857? If I knew the melody, I'd force you to sing it with me. But you can see what they're saying. You can understand that, right? Hurrah, frei Kansas, freie Erde, free Kansas, free soil. And we'll fight for that with sword, word, and deed, okay? Now this is for Ed. Frei Kansas, freier Boden, free Kansas, free soil, von Vorrecht frei und Band, free of privilege and preference, dem Schwarzen, the black, dem Roten, the red, sowie dem weißen Mann, as well as the white man. These were radical thoughts in those days. Frei Kansas, freie Erde, sei unser Feldgeschrei. Let that be our battle cry. Free soil, free Kansas. Krieg, Krieg mit Wort und Schwerte, sei stets der Sklaverei, which I'm sure we all agree with. War against slavery. There were other Germans in Kansas in the territorial period, like Gert Hollenberg. You've heard a lot about entrepreneurs lately. Let's pretend it's 1854, you're settling in Kansas, and you want to make a bunch of money. What would you do? Well, you build a ranch on the Oregon Trail where the settlers have to cross a river. What do they have to do when they get there? The ox have to be fed, the horses, the wagons have to be repaired, the people have to eat, maybe stay overnight. He made a ton of money, and he was able to name a town after himself. There's Hollenberg, Kansas, up near the Nebraska line. He created the town of Hanover, is considered the father of Washington County. How many here are a father of any county? All right. He died at sea, but there's a nice monument in the Hanover City Cemetery if you want to check it out. It's a state historic site, by the way, so Jim, I hope you're taking students up there to visit that. All right. Anyway, by 1861, when Kansas was admitted to the Union, there were some 80 German group settlements in territorial Kansas. You can see that's the part of Kansas that was open for settlement at that stage. Then comes the Civil War. Am I running out of time yet? Good. Just as a footnote, we had 2 companies, all German companies, in 1861, including the Steuben Guards, a little reference back to Baron von Steuben in the Revolutionary War. And in the Union Army, there were at least 200,000 native Germans and 12 generals. It's said that Robert E. Lee said, if you take the Dutch out of the Union Army, we'll whip them. Well, some people even claim there were close to 1/3 of the Union soldiers, either Germans or first-generation born Americans from German parents. All German regiments were common. So in those days, if you served in the Union Army, you might have to get your orders in German. That was the truth. How many of you have ever heard of a stimulus package? Don't get so happy about that. Abraham Lincoln could, what would we call him? He's not the father of our country. What is the father of emancipation? He's also the father, the super father are the mother of all stimulus packages. He had 2 of them in 1862, and what were they? Everybody knows they're up here, I think. One was the Homestead Act, which opened up land in the West for free possession. All you had to do is settle on your 160 acres, cultivate it for 5 years, and you got it. The other act was the Transcontinental Railroad Act of 1862, which did what? It gave lots and lots of land, federal land, to the big railroad companies so they would build railroad lines across the United States. And they could sell the land that they got from the federal government to settlers at relatively low prices. Why was that important? Well, you can't build a railroad to nowhere. They had to have settlers to be customers for the goods that were going to be brought out from the east, and then to produce agricultural products to be sent back east. So it was a win-win situation, as we say. But what it did was trigger a massive effort to recruit immigrants to settle in Kansas. They hired German guys. There was Carl Schmidt, who worked for the Santa Fe, and do you know the guy? No, you couldn't, you're too young. Adam Rödelheimer for the Kansas Pacific. They went to Europe, they went to Russia, they recruited Germans, Swedes, and Czechs to come out and settle along these right-of-ways and occupy that land. It's really amazing. Schmidt himself recruited enough Germans from Russia, from Germany, from the eastern United States to create 200 German communities along the Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way. I don't know how, well, you can all see that map, even at the back of the room. That's the Santa Fe, and 20 miles either side of the main rail line, the railroad had alternating sections of land to sell to these settlers. The other sections were the homestead sections, so they could fill up that territory with settlers, largely from Germany. Oh, can you read this? I know what it says, so I'm not going to pretend I can read it. But it says, if you send 25 cents to Carl Schmidt in Topeka, that's the address, Carl Schmidt, Topeka, you will get this map of the German colony Germania. How many of you live in this German colony in the middle of the state? Not a soul? Okay. Here's Ellenwood. Jim, you know where Ellenwood is? Have you been there? Ellenwood is one of my favorite towns because its street names are still named after famous Germans. Goethe, Schiller, Wieland, not even, Julia, where are you? Did she leave already? Shucks. I was going to ask her if she had heard of the great German author Wieland, because I bet most of our students have never even heard of him, but they do know of him in Ellenwood. There's even Fritz und Wilhelm streets. They must have run out of famous Germans and they just came up with some more names. It was going to have German administration, German government, German cultural institutions. It was going to be an all-German colony right smack in the middle of Kansas. Well, we know there is no Germania in Kansas, but there are tons of Germans who settled in that area, okay? These are maps that I'm going to show you from J. Neil Carman's over 3,000-page work that you can access, I believe, through KU Scholar Works, called Foreign Language Units of Kansas. This shows you the Mennonite settlement area along the Santa Fe, down in south central Kansas. Here's Newton, Bethel College, you may know of, McPherson, Inman, Bueller, Moundridge, etc. The Volga German district out in the Ellis and Russell County area. Millburger were Protestants from the Volga. The main Catholic area. Jim, which one are your people from?
You left my village also.
Uh-oh. That's a sub-village of Munger, right?
It's a suburb.
A suburb of Munger, okay. Let me see if I can find it. Probably right there. Or... That's pretty close, okay. And by the end of the 19th century, this is how Kansas would look from a German-speaking perspective. I'll get to what that really means in a second. But we have fairly widespread settlement. There's few counties without German settlements at this stage. Here's our Volga German friends. Here's the Mennonites, largely. You can almost see the Santa Fe line right through there. Western Sedgwick County, these were Catholics from the Rhineland that settled in there. Here's our Hollenberg Lutheran friends up there in Marshall and Washington counties. Have you guys been up there, by the way? Your church needs to take a little excursion up there. That's rich. German Catholics here in Nemaha County. There's also some Swiss up there. Anybody know what that little dot is right there? That's Bern. And who said Switzerland before? We still had speakers of Swiss German there up until recently. Rawlins and Decatur County, this red dot, do you guys know what that is? Those are Hungarian Germans that settle up there. They actually named the community Pest after Budapest, okay? The last speaker, Ed was talking about the last speaker, died in December 2010. 94 years old, I believe, okay. Bukovina, Ellis, the town of Ellis. Jim, what kind of folks live out there?
Those were Austrians, we didn't talk to them.
Yeah, that's absolutely. The first time I talked to people in Ellis County, the Volga Germans, they referred to their language as Deutsch, and the other people were Österreicher, the Austrians. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. They speak slightly different dialects. Some speak Bavarian, some speak a Palatine dialect, but they're distinctly different than the Volga German mass here. Windhorst, got to point that out, okay. Well, what happened to all this stuff? There are a lot of reasons. I'll throw this one out, and tonight I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I think it's overblown. The anti-German movement after the United States entry into the First World War depressed German language and culture. It did not wipe it out because we still have people who speak it. That was nearly 100 years ago. But it made it much, much less public. In 1910, German in Kansas was much in the same position as Spanish is today. You heard it on the streets. You could go to communities where everybody felt comfortable speaking I'll say a variety of German. Church services were held in German, etc. There were German newspapers. But with one fell swoop, that had to go indoors because it was no longer safe, in a sense, to be a public German speaker. But in the families, in the barnyard, sure. What else would you speak to the cows? But some dialect of German, or the pigs for that matter. So what's left of all of this? Lots and lots of religious denominations. You're looking at that symbol, Ed? Yeah, I'll tell you about that in a second. The big religions, like the German Catholics, the several synods of the Lutheran Church, the Reformed, the evangelical groups, and lots of smaller things. What happened in Germany in 1517? Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses, and that opened up a can of worms, didn't it? What it meant was that no longer were all these folks members of one Holy Mother Church, but now everybody who wanted to have a different theological point of view could found their own church. And the radical Protestants, like the Amish and the Mennonites, are still doing it. And I'm sure a lot of others are doing it. But what that meant is that in German-speaking areas, we had a plethora of new religious denominations. You've probably heard of the Dunkers, the Christian Apostolics, all kinds of folks, and they all ended up here in Kansas. So we have them all right? A lot of foodstuffs. Bierox, we already talked about that. Christmas cookies like Lebkuchen and Springerli. And Ed, Athletic clubs still survive. Now they would probably be called athletic clubs. But in those days, they were semi-political organizations. There were Turner societies, which means gymnastics, in just about every major town in Kansas: Wichita, Topeka, Leavenworth. Lawrence still has its old Turnhalle standing, and Kansas City still has a Turnverein, or Turner Society. This is for Jim. Everybody has probably had the bierox that our Russian-German friends brought with them, from the Russian word pirog. I first thought it was ox or steer meat boiled in beer until I actually got to the place and was served. Let's see, down in Hayesville, Kansas, you can get a dozen for $30 if you want to go down there. That's south of Wichita. Pfeffernüsse, or peppernuts, prominent in Marion County, I see, for $6. And these are, that's a Mennonite Gebäck pastry called Tweebach. It's like a double biscuit that they eat with plum jam and tea in the afternoon for Fashpa, if you'd like to join them. The wedding customs are, you hear this all the time about the 3-day Volga German wedding that used to take place out in Ellis County. Do they still have any of that? The Hochzeit, sure. And there's the Hochzeitspieler. You had to have a polka dance and the whole business. Beautiful churches dot the Kansas landscape. This is Pfeiffer with Holy Cross. Unfortunately, many of them are closed. There's no pastor or no priest, and so they are there to see, but unfortunately not active except for special occasions. The Mennonites have also large churches, especially in the south central part of the state. This is Alexanderville near Gossel in Marion County, named after Tsar Alexander, who brought the Mennonites into the Russian Empire 200 years ago. This is Immaculate Heart of Mary in Windhorse that I was talking about. And this log cabin used to be right at mile marker 300 on Interstate 70, right outside of Junction City. This is the first Lutheran church in Kansas in the 1850s on Clark's Creek. And I can't tell you what synod they might have belonged to, but I hope they were. God bless them for being Missouri Synod. Okay. It's now well, the cabin has been moving. It was on Clark's Creek, and then they moved it to that little park next to the interstate, and now it's in a city park in Junction City. So I used to be able to look out my car window as I drove past and see it. This is back to Carmen's Atlas again. This just shows you the large number of German-speaking congregations that were in Kansas. The crosses are Catholic. The square boxes are Lutherans. There were German Methodists, German Congregationalists. Let's see if I can find Apostolic Christian. Ed, that's the reverse of your teepee. Okay? You see? Whoop, see that right there? Those are Swiss in Greenwood County. Pennsylvania Germans, also, I would say by 1880, there were some 30,000 Pennsylvania Germans in Kansas. People call them the Pennsylvania Dutch. Anybody have a problem with those terms? What does Dutch mean? Dutch means German. Now, historically, it just meant German. Now we've narrowed the meaning to the Netherlands, but in the 18th, 19th century, it meant German. So Pennsylvania Dutch is Pennsylvania German. It's not something like wooden shoes and windmills, okay, or Gouda cheese or whatever you associate with that. These diamonds represent Dunkers, Church of the Brethren. We have 6 different Church of the Brethren groups in Kansas, from the old German Baptist Brethren that look and are mistaken for Amish, and the Church of the Brethren, which is totally modernized today. The stars, let me point out the stars. Anderson County and Reno County are oldest Old Order Amish settlements. And by the way, we are getting more Old Order Amish moving to Kansas from other states. And what do these folks do? They still speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Their kids speak it. Sometimes they have to bribe the kids with money to keep them speaking it at the dinner table. Yeah, I heard a story about a guy giving his kids a dime if they would speak Dutch instead of English, okay? But anyway, it's still happening. There's your Turner Society from Lawrence. I'll gloss through these because I see I'm getting close. That's the Turner Hall. It's still standing in Lawrence, just purchased by the Lawrence Preservation Alliance, so we're going to do something with this building. That's an old German church in Lawrence. It's now a residence. So maybe there's a future for the old defunct German churches. But what about the language? That's what we're here to talk about. That was all prologue. All right, now I'm going to start my actual presentation. As I mentioned, the Old Order Amish still use Dutch. They have to use it in their bi-weekly worship service every other week. They get together, about 20 families or so, by horse and buggy, and have Dutch preached at them. At home they use Dutch, but in the school they learn English. And if they work outside of their agricultural community, they of course have to use English as well. And as Hector knows, we've had a recent influx of Mennonites from Chihuahua, Mexico, into southwestern Kansas, and they've kind of scattered into some other parts of the state as well. But in 2003, it was estimated that there were 3,000 to 5,000. I don't know if you have any better figures than that. I talked to a Mennonite pastor in Copeland, Kansas, and that's the figure that he gave me. These are younger families with children who speak what I call Mennonite Low German. They call it Deutsch or Plautdeutsch. How long they will continue to use their variety of German is a guess at this stage. But since they have pickup trucks and they shop at Walmart, no, you were talking about Walmart, Super Walmart actually in Garden City, it's probably just a question of time. The others, such as the Volga Germans and the folks up in Nemaha and Washington County, the older Mennonites near Newton. Here we're looking at a situation where, with time, the last speakers are going to pass from the scene because the younger generations have ceased learning the language, just as in the case with Osage. This is a census map showing where there are folks who claimed in the 2000 census 5 years of age and older that they prevalently spoke German in the home, all right? And you can see the Volga Germans are hanging in there. Junction City and Fort Riley is probably responsible for Gary County there. Marion, that could be some older Mennonites, but this is what really interests me. Down in southwest part of the state, Seward County, Finney, and places like that, where there are people who speak German, all right, regularly in the home. And as I said, it's Deutsch rather than Deutsch, okay? Here's another interesting map, and I'll show you tonight a little bit more close-up map of this, but here it says that there are several counties in in Kansas. Where are we? We're in Kansas, where German is the prevalent language after Spanish, so English, Spanish, and then German. So we still have a number of counties where German is in pretty good shape in Kansas. Now, to get back to the title slide, I may have to come out here to see this better. I use Deutsch, the Volga Germans, some of the Bukovina Germans, some of the Mennonites refer to their language as Deutsch. On the northern tier, where we have Low German speakers from northern Germany, Marshall and Washington counties, they refer to their language as Deutsch. The Old Order Amish, Pennsylvania German, they say Deutsch. if somebody wants to know about the phonetic processes, I could talk about that in the discussion. And finally, our friends, the Mennonites from Russia, via various other sojourns, Canada, Mexico, etc., speak Dietsch, okay? And Vince was talking about our research. I'm going to give you a 5-second course on German dialectology, okay? The spoken language in rural areas of Germany can basically be divided up into 3 major groups. In the north, we have what we call Low German because it's close to the seacoast. In the south, we have what we call Upper German, or some people say High German, because you're getting into the alpine mountainous areas. And what's in the middle? The middle, okay, Middle German, or some people say Central German. Low, middle, high, or upper, okay? Just give you a couple of words to try to keep this in some place. The Low German dialects in northern Germany, by and large, have the same consonant system as English. Where did the Anglo-Saxons come from? Northern Germany. Of course, they didn't call it Northern Germany then. They called it whatever they called it. And they took little boats and went across to Britain, and it became Anglerland. All right, okay. So we could argue, I'm saying this in public, that English is a Low German dialect, but don't tell your friends about it, okay? So if we say water, open, make, apple, we'll leave out child for a second. In Low German, it's going to be something like that. Water, Water, open, backen, Apfel. And as Ed said, sometimes these consonants play little tricks on us, like my vocal cords are. English does palatalize a K in front of certain vowels, so we say a child instead of a child. German has Kind. When you get down to the central part of the country, you start seeing Wasser, offen, machen. Everybody say machen. That'll help get the phlegm out of your throats. But they still say Apfel. They still have that P. You get a little bit further south, then they have to say Apfel. Everybody try that. Okay. And if you, boy, it's hard to have a microphone right here and then cough. If you go down to Switzerland, then you got to do something even worse. You got to take that K and say Kind. Everybody, Kind. It's just a K plus the Ach. You can do it, Vince, right? Vince is perfect, okay. Now let's hit Kansas real quick. Bremen, Kansas is going to be our example of Low German, Partridge, Amish, Middle German, and Bern up in Nemaha County, that's our High German, okay? Zwei, zwei, zwei. Fünf, fünf, fünf. Ich, ich, I. Is that out of line? That was just my perspective, okay. We is V in Low German, mir in the other two. High, Faut, Fuß, Fuß, Freude, Fies, Füß. How would you say 2 feet in Bremen, Kansas? Zwei Freude. In Partridge, it's zwei Fies. If you're Amish, you've got to have zwei Fies, okay? And their horses are all different. The Mennonites have a Pferd. I'm sorry, not the Mennonites, the Low Germans. The Volga Germans and the Amish have a Gal, or Gaul, different vowels sometimes. And our Swiss friends up in Nemaha County, or the Bavarians in Ellis County, say Ross. A quick question, which one is cognate with the English word horse, which is genetically related to our horse? Yeah. So we're really Swiss and Bavarians for some reason. And their potatoes are all different, even if they look alike, all right? The Low Germans have a Kartoffel. The Amish eat Grumbeere. And the Swiss and the Bavarians eat earth apples. Erdäpfel. The Mennonites that speak Dietsch have a totally different word. They say Erdschok, an earth shuck. Okay, so all of these things are grown in Kansas, though. I may have to skip over this because this, I've got 5 minutes, right? I'm getting close. I took one of the sentences that we have used for our interviews, and you may think it's a funny sentence, and a lot of people laugh when they have to say it, but this is basically what, and you talked about orthography, this is my orthography, okay? I wrote it so that you could read it if you knew Standard German, okay? So in Marshall County in Bremen, they say, de gode ole Kerl breekt durch den Eis mit sein Pferd und fall in den Kohlwater. The good old man broke through the ice with his horse and fell into the water. You can see some of the resemblance to English there. Now here's that Mennonite Low German. De gode ole Mann broke durch den Eis mit sein Pferd und fall in den Kohlwater. There's slight differences, but some of the consonants are still similar. There's Piet instead of Pet. Reno County, Pennsylvania Dutch, der gute alte Mann ist durch im Eis gefallen mit Segal und ist ins Kaltwasser gefallen. Or Bukovinian Swabian dialect, that would be north of Ellis, Jim. Der gute alte Mann ist durchs Eis gebrochen und mit seinem Gaul ins kalte Wasser gefallen. You can see slight differences in the past participles that occur, different verb tenses that are used. Cathedral of the Plains, Victoria, Volga German Herzog. Der gute alte Mann ist durch den Eis gebrochen mit Segal und ist in den kalte Wasser gefallen. For those of you interested in German dialects, that endingless past participle is characteristic for a very specific area in Germany, around Luxembourg and the western part of the Mosel River Valley. So that gives us a pretty good idea of where that dialect stems from. Schönchen, der gute alte Mann ist durch ein Eis gebrochen mit sein Gaul und ist neigefallen in Wasser. That has endings on the past participle, so it's a very different kind of dialect. For those of you like Bavaria, Oktoberfest, the German Bohemians in Ellis County, der gute alte Mo ist durchs Eis gebrochen mit sein Ross und ist ins kalte Wasser eingefallen. Again, very different type of participial structure. And for Ed, what happened to the N in the word man? It created a nasalized vowel, mo, okay? This is one of my favorites. This is Swiss German from Nemaha County, Bern. Der gut Mann ist durchs Eis mit der Ross ins Wasser Kate. Well, Kate, it sounds like my daughter's name, Kate. And I didn't know what was going on when I first got this recording and started listening to it. And I finally went to a person in the KU language lab who was a native of Switzerland. And I just walked up to the person. I said, if I said to you, der ist ins Wasser geht, what would it mean? She said, well, he fell into the water. So I knew it was, it was the correct form, but it's a totally different verb than fallen, to fall, okay? I won't give you the details on that because I know we're not having a linguistics symposium, but it's fascinating stuff. It's actually related to the German verb to marry, heiraten. I'll tell you about that later, Vince. All right, let's get back to a text again. This is one of my favorites. It's from Lawrence Weigel, who was probably the dean of folklore in Ellis County until his death about 5-6 years ago. I recorded this back in 1990, and I'll just read it to you and do the translation. Do ist ein Mann beichtergangen der Kirche beim Pater. A guy went to church to confess with the priest. Und der sagt, Pater, ich habe eine Sau gestohlen von einem Mann und ich tät gern das Geld geben, was die Sau wert war. Du kannst das Geld den Mann geben, wo ich die Sau gestohlen habe und kann ich Verzeihnis kriegen. Recht? He says, Father, I've stolen a pig from a man and I'd like to give you the money that pig was worth. You can give the man the money that I stole the pig from, and then I'll receive absolution. Is that okay? Und hat der Pater gesagt, ganz recht, wie viel war die Sau wert? And the priest said, oh, okay, that's fine. How much was that pig worth? Na, ich denk so $10. Well, I think about $10. And then the priest says, na ja, gib mir das Geld, geb ich's den Mann und geb dir Verzeihnis. Okay, give me the money, I'll give it to the man, and you'll receive absolution. Und der Mann holt sein Geld raus und fängt an zählen. The man takes out his money and starts to count it. Und sagt der Pater, warte mal, du hast mir ja $20 gegeben. And then the priest said, hey, wait a minute, you just gave me $20. Well, Pater, für den Preis denke ich stehle mir noch es auf. Vince got it, good. Well, Father, at that price, I'm going to go steal me another pig. Oh, come on, it was funnier than that. Okay. Well, that was a little Deutsch. Now let's go to Deutsch. And unfortunately, I don't have a running text like this with a nice joke in it. This is from Concordia, Missouri. And is that okay? It's the same dialect as in Bremen and Hanover, Kansas. So this is from a lady that I recorded over in Concordia, Missouri. And this is Low German, Northern German, Deutsch, okay? Well, wir wohnen über der Straße von dem College, von St. Paul's College. Und wir wohnen auf einer Farm und das Heunerhus, was recht dicht bei der Straße zwischen dem College und unserem Farm. Well, we live across the street from the college, from St. Paul's College, and we live on a farm, and the chicken house was right close to the street between the college and our farm. Und wir hatten witte Heuner, und die witten Heuner, die löpen immer über die Straße nach dem College hin. And we had white chickens. And the white chickens, they always were running across the street to the college. Und einmal da ging min Mama nach, will die Heuner futtern, und da käm sie in Hus, und da sagt sie zu min Papa, der Heuner, der slappt alle. And once my mom went out to feed the chickens, and then she came back in the house and said to my dad, the chickens are all asleep. Ach, sagt Papa, what is that denn? And Dad said, oh, what can be the matter? Do geit he hin, he goes out, ja, der Heuner, der slappt. Yep, the chickens are all asleep. Da nimmt he een von der Heuner und nimmt sie nach einem Doktorchen in der Stadt, und da sagt der Doktor, der Heuner, die sind besoffen. And he takes the chicken to a doctor in the city, and the doctor says, the chickens are drunk. Die sind besoffen. And then Dad says, Papa sagt, das kann nicht angehen, dass die besoffen sind. It's impossible that they're drunk. Die hat schon nichts hat, was die besoffen macht. They haven't had anything that made them drunk. Ja, die sind aber besoffen. But the doctor then says, yep, but they're still drunk. Da geht he nach Hus hin, he goes back home und sagt he to Mama, and says he to Mama. You can see almost the English pronouns in there. Die Heuner, die sind besoffen, the chickens are drunk. Geht he in Heunerhus hin, goes out to the chicken house, da kickt he in that ding, wo die Heuner utrinken dort, and he looks into the thing that the chickens drink out of. The person couldn't remember the word for trough or whatever. Und schluckt dat ein Beten. Und dat rück nach Bier. He tasted it a little bit, and it tasted like beer. Da sind die College-Jungs begangen und hat do Bier in dat Wasser doen. The college boys had gone over and put beer in the chicken water und had alle unsere Heuner besoffen gemacht and made all of our chickens drunk. Okay. That's a true story, by the way. She swore that it was true. Okay. But you can see, look at the word for street, Straße, with a nice T in the middle of it like we'd expect. And you get that kind of TD mix-up like you were talking about in Osage as well. Amish. Reno County and Anderson County show the largest number for Kansas with a population that would be speaking Pennsylvania Dutch. Obviously, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, some counties in Iowa and Wisconsin have larger concentrations of Pennsylvania Dutch. I don't have, again, a running text, but this is from a 2009 dissertation that was completed at KU. And you can see the mixture of English and German, or Pennsylvania Dutch, taking place. September sind wir erst in Indiana gegangen für ein Nephew sei Hochzeit. Well, back in September, we first went to Indiana for my nephew's wedding, okay? Und sie hat einen heart attack gehabt 8 Jahre zurück. She had a heart attack 8 years ago. Und in weiter East tun sie ein bisschen different schwätzen. And back East, they talk a little bit different. Und the one in Wisconsin schafft doet produce raisen. You see a lot of English going on in there. Und my Bruder in Axtel wohnt, doet melken und farmen. My one brother who works in Wisconsin, he raises produce. And the brother that's up in Axtell, he milks and farms, so he's a dairy and general farmer. Ich tue also de Meedhelfer Hausarbeit too. I also help the girls do the work around the house. Wir müssten einen Driver haben für auf Lawrence gehen. We need to have a driver to get to Lawrence. Okay, so again, they travel by horse and buggy, and they need to get a friend to take them in a car. Hector, you want to take over now? There's something going on here. I'll abbreviate with Ogallala Aquifer, providing water for feedlots. And people like Iowa beef packers, and it's Tyson Foods now, right? Coming in and putting in their slaughterhouses next to these feedlots. And what does that require? It requires labor, lots of laborers. It's the same that's been the case for years in Kansas. Economic opportunity, trying to make a better life for yourself, and so people are streaming into southwestern Kansas, Somalia, Laos, Vietnam, what have you, Mexico, and with them are coming Mennonites from Chihuahua province, and they speak this Plautdeutsch, okay? And here you can see a map of Mennonites. You can see there's some pretty intensive colors down in that southwestern part of Kansas. And this could, if Spanish doesn't become our next official language in Kansas, this could become the state song of Kansas. And I could sing this with you. I won't force you to do it, though. It's to the tune of O Christmas Tree. So, O Kansas Land, O Kansas Land. Oh, you can figure that out, right? O Kansas land. Op die hab ich min komst geplant. Upon thee I have planted my cabbage. Don't you like cabbage? No. Und kiek me ganz unverbleft, and I look around and I'm not so perturbed. Auf dadurch noch einmal Hälfte jeft, whether heads will be produced with the cabbage plants. Und wann ich dann bezieh min Korn, and when I look at the grain field, nee, dann verchep ich nicht die Form. Well, I don't have to sell the farm, do I? And it goes on. There's other verses about sulky plows and all kinds of good stuff. But that will be the future of Kansas if the Mennonites keep coming and don't give up their language as far as German varieties are concerned. And I think with that, I'll just make a reference, as you did, either Jim or Vince, to the website where you can listen to 40 sentences for each of the dialects that we've recorded, similar to that good old man falling in the water with his horse and breaking through the ice. And then with that, I'll say, Dankeschön.